Hopefully just starting the recording now. Wonderful. So everybody, this has been recorded. So if your friends, families, brothers, sisters miss it, you can tell them to catch it up later and you can show it to them. There's lots of us in this room, so please do ensure you keep your mics off unless you want to ask a question. There will be questions in the chat as well. I'm sure Megan will be happy to field them. But thank you to the first speaker from Epic Global Solutions, Megan Vanderson, for attending today. She's here to give you a quick introduction into her experiences with gambling and problem gambling. And it's all for Responsible Gaming Education Month, which is an industry-wide collaboration through all the gambling operators in the US. And of course, as Bally has been in the US and further afield, we're extending that to the UK and Spain as well. So Megan, I'll hand over to you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So hello, everybody. It's so good to see so many people on here. I don't think I was quite expecting this many people, but it's absolutely great to see you all. We're going to go right into it. So I'm going to give you just a quick little background about me and my role in Epic. So I've actually only been working for Epic for just over 2 and a bit months, so coming up to 3 months, which to me is absolutely incredible. I mean, I won't go into too much detail because you're going to hear about my story in a little while, but I went from working in a restaurant for 4.5 years, absolutely hating what I did, to now being able to use my lived experience to create a positive outlook on things, like turning something that was so dark and horrible in my life into something positive by doing what I do for Epic today. You know, it's absolutely incredible. I'm just very grateful to be given this opportunity as well. You might have to bear with me just a little bit because today is my first ever solo session, so please bear with me. Like I said, if you've got any questions or you want to interrupt me, just raise your hand or pop a comment in the chat, and I'll try and answer it as best as I can. So hopefully, with Alan's session earlier on this morning, he kind of would have explained to you a little bit about what Epic do. So we are essentially, we work in prevention. So we're all for working and collaborating with sport, education and industry to try and prevent gambling harms from occurring. So when we look at getting that balance right, so on a personal level, you know, we're looking at these golden balls, as such, is what I like to call them. These represent the majority of the population, those who can actually gamble responsibly, you know, and without causing harm. They enjoy it as it should be enjoyed, you know, as a hobby, pastime. However, you've got that big red ball, which unfortunately is the category that I have to sit in. As much as I wish I could be a part of them gold balls, as much as I wish I could still gamble responsibly today, you know, unfortunately I am in that the red ball, which basically, you know, the minority of us who cannot gamble responsibly, that can sometimes outweigh the majority. And, you know, it's our job as a company to kind of make sure we get that balance right. You know, all of this amazing work that is done by the company to protect people, to give back to communities, can all be undone by a small minority of people if they aren't looked after and if fall through the cracks, you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop up a little slide. Sorry, all these people still keep on popping up. There's more people coming in, so welcome to everybody that's literally just joined. I'm just going to show you this next slide. So do you think the gambling industry have an image problem? And this is something that could be quite controversial to some people, but I'm going to show you a couple of articles on the screen here. And these are mainly just, you know, negative stories that are targeted towards the industry. You know, you're not going to really hear about the people like you who work in player protection, who do what they can to help minimize gambling harm. And unfortunately, you know, this is what they like to focus on. So we are on a call of action. You know, it's on all of us in this space to change the perception of what people think. And one of the best ways is to prevent harm. And this is what we are committed to within Epic, and why we only work with operators who share our same passion, like you guys. You know, and I'm very, very grateful to be a part of such a an amazing team. You know, when I first come into recovery, I had such a massive vendetta against the industry. I thought you guys were all out to get me. And you know, over time, as my recovery progressed, and as I changed as a person, you know, and the reason why I solely joined Epic is because I could actually see the work that you guys are trying to do and how much you guys actually care, you know. And it is just absolutely incredible the amount of people that I've spoke to who work in the industry, who are doing and trying their utmost hardest to you know, to help others and to prevent harm. You know, it's absolutely incredible. And this is basically going to then lead on to me sharing a bit about my experience with you guys. So that was just a couple of brief like intro slides. This is the juicy part. This is the part that everyone wants to be here for. So I'm going to share with you a bit about my experience, and we're just going to go straight into it. So I'm not going to ask you guys a geography question. I'm just going to tell you guys straight up where I'm from. Oh, I think someone's just took over. Okay, bear with me 2 seconds. Don't know what happened.
Control freaks here in Bally, so we just wanted to show you how busy we were.
That's completely fine. That is absolutely fine. So I come from a lovely place called Essex, which is located in London. I grew up in a lovely household. You know, my mum and my dad were always really supportive. All my family were very overbearing, you know, very close, always around for Christmas, New Year, always having parties. And one of the biggest things about my childhood was owning like a holiday home. And we would go down the caravan every summer holidays, every Easter holidays. And it was a big part of my life growing up, you know. And when I was at this caravan site, I discovered arcades and amusements and the dance machines and the 2p machines. But most importantly, I discovered slot machines. And one of my very earliest memories, what I can remember, is being around 8 or 9 years old with my friends, watching old people play this particular like slot machine game. And we would watch them put all their money in the machine and not win anything. And when they'd walk away, we would jump on that machine, would pounce on it like tigers, and we would win all of their money. And we would use that money to go buy sweets, you know, burgers, chip shop, you know, and we absolutely loved it. And that was one of my earliest memories of gambling, you know, very positive, very, you know, like just being a kid, doing what kids love to do, being sneaky, mischievous. Sometimes I would steal the odd pound coin from my mum's purse and feel like I was a rebel. But in my home life, in my family life, you know, I actually had a family member, my auntie. She was a compulsive gambler. I was kind of shielded from that when I was quite young, and gambling was always seen as something fun and enjoyable in my life. You know, we used to have family game nights, bingo parties. We would do poker nights. I learned how to play poker when I was really young. We would go to the dog racing as well, as part of like, I don't know, birthday parties. And it wasn't seen as anything bad, you know. So behind the kind of glamour and the amazement that I was kind of brought up with, you know, I didn't know this, but my auntie was suffering with a gambling addiction. I remember one night she won £127,000 at a casino, which was a progressive jackpot. And I just remember how happy everybody was. But what I didn't actually see, because I was so young, was the pain and suffering it caused my aunt later on down the line. You know, because of that win, she put all the money back in. She had to remortgage her house. You know, she had to get out multiple loans and eventually went bankrupt and was declared homeless. But because I was so young, in my eyes, you know, she just won all this money. It seemed like such an amazing idea. You know, it was all great, and they wanted to kind of protect me from having to see all of that harm. So life just kind of went on. I love football or soccer if you guys are from America. Me and my dad used to have season tickets. We used to go to our local stadium, West Ham, and it was absolutely great. My dad loved football betting, and I never really got the hang of that. Even like coming up to when I come into recovery, I was never really a football bet sort of person. But everything was really great. As I progressed into my teenage years, I would still continue going down the caravan. And that caravan site, that's where I had all my firsts. I had my first cigarette, I had my first joint, I had my first blackout drink, passed out on a fishing field, at 14 years old. I grew up there, and, I kind of flourished into this teenager, and I was just living my absolute best life, and 2017 was probably the first kind of real trauma to kind of happen in my life. When I come back from visiting a family member in Norwich after a weekend away, and my mum had picked me up from the train station, and she said, Megan, me and your dad have split up. And if I'm honest, I could probably see it coming. My mum and my dad didn't really have the best of relationships, a lot of arguing around money, secrets, and it was quite bad. So I knew that something like that would happen eventually, but I wasn't expecting it to happen when I was that young. My little sister at the time, she must have only been about 10. So it was quite hard for the family, and the breakup wasn't great either. It was a very abusive, toxic, argumentative breakup with lying and cheating and a lot of carnage, and it led to my mum having a nervous breakdown. And instead of me turning 18 and going off to university or college and beginning my life as an adult, I ended up kind of staying back at home, getting a job at a cinema, which was The View in Romford, and having to kind of become an adult really quickly, do the shopping, look after my mum, look after my sister, get her to school, because my mum was just in a place where she was just an absolute nervous wreck. So it was really, that kind of period of my life was quite difficult. But on the outside, I made myself look okay. I was still trying to go out and socialize. I had an amazing boyfriend who I thought was the love of my life. Things were great. And for the next kind of few years, I discovered raving. I used to love going raving and clubbing and experimenting with all these sort of party drugs like ecstasy, pills, ketamine, acid. And I felt like at home I had to be really responsible, and I had to be a caregiver, and I had to look after the family. I was like the provider at that point. But when I went out to a club or when I went bingo, I just felt like I could just let my hair down, press that big red button, and all my worries would just go away. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Turning 18 and going to my first bingo hall, do you know what? I was waiting for that day ever since I was a little girl. My mum used to absolutely glorify the bingo hall. I used to see the one near where I live, and it was absolutely massive, and it had all these amazing lights, and I was so excited to go. So when I did finally turn 18 and I was able to go, I was it was just, it was incredible. And I remember winning £60. I think I must have only spent £20 and I won £60, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. I used that money to go out with, and I thought, this is great. I can come here with my friends before we go on a night out, see if we can win some money, and then it'll be all good if we do. But if we don't, then it's all right, because we're just going to sit here and drink anyway. It was a sociable thing. Everything was, up until this point, was all right. It was manageable. It was responsible. I was having fun, and I'm going to bring up this year because I think not just for my life, but for everybody's life, this must have been one of the most horrible years for everybody. We're going to go back to 2020, COVID, lockdown. And by this point, I hadn't spoke to my dad for 3 years because of the breakup. And COVID-19, that year was a very big year for me. You know, we decided to get a puppy. My dad come back into my life at the beginning of the year after not speaking to him for 3 years. He just one day showed up on my door, and I was a bit taken back. I was like, wow, what are you doing here? And I wanted to shout at him. I wanted to go, how dare you come in, da, da, da. But something just said to me, no, Megan, it's time for you to make peace with this man. And I was really, really grateful that I got my dad back. And obviously, we got hit with this lockdown, not allowed to go out, not allowed to see family, friends, loved ones. And we made the best of it. We had my dad's birthday, so he would come down and we'd celebrate his 50th birthday. We had the puppy Teddy, who was just the light of our lives. He was making us laugh. We was taking him for walks, and it just brought such a pleasant mood to what seems to be like the worst time that everybody else was having around us. Things were going okay, and we were managing, we were surviving, FaceTiming our families. I wasn't going to work, I was getting furloughed, and we just tried to make the best out of a bad situation. And I know that COVID must have been horrible for a lot of people, and I know everybody tried their best, to make the best out of that situation. And during the height of lockdown, on the 8th of May 2020, and in the UK, that was a VE Day, Veterans Day. The street was having a massive party, and they were playing wartime music from World War II, and everybody had their chairs out the front in their front garden drinking. And I just remember my mum walking through the door, and she was like shaking, like uncontrollably shaking. And I was sitting there with my sister, so I was 20, she must have only been 14 at the time. And my mum just sits down, her friend's having to carry her in, and we're like, what's happened? And my dad lived in a beautiful place called Mersey, and every morning he would do a morning walk across the beach. And it just so happened that morning he was having a morning walk on the beach, and he had a heart attack and died. Just lights out, completely just gone. My mum said to me, she said, Megan, your dad's dead. And I think it was the shock more than anything, and the guilt really set in. Like, I didn't speak to this man for 3 years, and all of a sudden he's gone. Maybe I was resentful at myself. I didn't really know how to react. I just got the relationship back with him. We were building that up week by week, and things were going so well. We had just celebrated his birthday, and all of a sudden he's gone. And that was the kind of article that was posted a couple of days after it happened, and it completely rocked our world. If he had died of COVID, maybe it would have been a bit easier because of the situation and the circumstances that we were living in. But the fact that he was just taken like that, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I didn't know how to deal with those feelings. I'm a very internalized person. I'll instantly quick to go make sure that everyone around me is okay. And when Dad died, I internalized it. I don't think I even cried until the funeral, and even then I cried at the funeral, and that was it. Done. Only 10 people were allowed in the chapel for his funeral. It was a really sad day. And not long after that, my uncle had died. Same thing. He had a cardiac arrest in his bathroom in the middle of the night. Which again, it just shocked me again. All of this pain, all this carnage was happening around me, and I didn't really know what to do. I couldn't go out. I was just confined to these four walls of my house. And I know I had Teddy. So I used to take him out for walks all the time, and he still tried to cheer us up. And, he was a good little companion to have. Just before my 20th birthday, on the 6th of July, 2020, I was in bed, and I got woken up to my mum screaming. And I haven't heard her scream like that since my dad had died. So I was like, what's going on? And she said to me, Megan, you need to come quickly. Teddy's been hit by a car. My partner at the time had taken him out for a walk. He was only 5 months old, so we told him to not take him off the lead. His recall wasn't great, but he didn't listen to me. Took him off the lead, and next thing you know, he gets spooked and runs into the road, and he got hit by a car and unfortunately died instantly. And he was only a puppy. The driver didn't stop, and that for me was my breaking point. I think I cried more at Teddy dying than when my dad had died. It was pretty raw, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I just didn't know what to do. I think I just went in to myself. I isolated myself. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to socialize, and I didn't know how to deal with all these rejection, this pain. And also at this point, I should mention the guy that I was with. He had left me and got a girl pregnant. So within the space of 4 months, we had lockdown. My dad had died. My dog got run over. The love of my life left me. And then I'm just left with myself, not knowing what to do and how to cope. And so this is what I decided to do. I decided to dye my hair pink. And I decided to go out to the pubs as soon as we was allowed to. And I decided to suppress all of these feelings and just hit that big red button and say, do you know what? Forget everything. I'm just going to completely run with the races. And I discovered online gambling because the bingo halls still weren't open. And I remember the Grand National after lockdown, and I downloaded an app to place a bet on with my nan and granddad. And I remember I kept the app on my phone, and at this point I had tried my first line of cocaine. And within 3 months of me trying my first line of cocaine, I become a daily user. And I found myself laying awake at night, tossing and turning, not really knowing how to handle myself, really, because when you're high, your brain's a million miles an hour. You can't sit still, you can't concentrate. And I just went on this app that I'd had on my phone, and I just saw this online scratch card, and I decided to put a tenner in, and I won. And then I played with my winnings, and I won again. And I thought, this is great. And before you know it, I'm gambling every weekend. I'm putting a tenner in of my wages. This is a point where I worked in a restaurant, so I was getting paid every single Friday, and I would spend half my wages on my gambling, and the other half of my wages would go on drugs, because that's all I enjoyed doing at that point. They were the two things that took me from reality. And at this point, I didn't really see it as an issue. I was still having fun. I was gambling within my means. I still had money left over. I started seeing a drug dealer as well. He became my best friend and eventually my boyfriend at this point as well. And that's when things started taking a bit of a turn for the worse. The weight starts dropping. The money starts getting less and less and less. And at this point, I take out my first loan. It was only a small loan, and that was meant to pay off my drug debt. And instead of paying off my drug debt, I spent it on an online scratch card. And I thought, right, how am I going to get out of this one? I remember this was taken just before my 21st birthday. And this was on my 21st birthday. I was in A&E with my mum because they thought I had appendicitis. And I remember laying in a hospital bed, they'd keep me in overnight. And instead of sleeping, resting, I decided to sit in the toilet, sniffing my brains out and gambling on my phone. So, as you can see, it was just getting from bad to worse. And I just started to increase my style of play. You know, I would go from scratch cards to online slingo to bingo to roulette to slot machines, you know, and I was finding that I needed something quicker and quicker and quicker, which is why I liked the scratch cards because they were quick. I could get them done quickly. And it got to the point where I was in a lot of debt with my drug dealer. I think I got into about £3,000 debt with him. I took out my first credit card, which I had already maxed out, and I couldn't really see a way out of that. And I just remember one night I was sitting in my room, I couldn't get any drugs, I was in deep psychosis, I had no money. My drug dealer couldn't come out to me and I didn't know what to do. And I remember going into the bathroom and I smashed my stepdad's razor blade. And I was gonna just end it all. I said I can't do it anymore. I was gonna slash my wrists, and I thought this is gonna be it. And then my mum walks in and she says, "Megan, what's wrong?" And I said to her, "I can't stop taking cocaine." It must be the drugs that's the problem. You know, I couldn't tell her about my gambling. So I sought help through Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started to get sober. But no way could I tell anybody about my gambling. That was my secret. That was the thing that I didn't think was a problem. And the more sober I got, the more into recovery I got, the more the gambling progressed. You know, they talk about it in the rooms of recovery. They say you substitute one thing for another, one drug for another, one substance, etc. And you know, the gambling was just piling up, getting worse and worse and worse. And I was too scared, I was too embarrassed to tell anybody. You know, what kind of 21-year-old girl would be a compulsive gambler? No way. I would never walk into a bookies. I would never go into a casino because I'm just a young girl. People are going to look at me. They're going to laugh at me. They're going to think, what is she doing in here? You know, around where I live, drugs and alcohol are just, it's rife. Yeah, and it's very much accepted to be an alcoholic or to be a drug addict. And I was so much more confident and comfortable walking into a meeting and saying, I'm an addict, you know, I'm a cocaine addict, I'm an alcoholic. But the thought of somebody finding out about my online gambling, you know, it used to send shivers and that pit in my stomach. It was awful. So I lied my way through these 12 steps, and on the outside everything was great. I was doing loads of meetings, I'd found loads of new friends. You know, I had a boyfriend who was amazing on the outside, like life looked great. I'd moved in with him, we got 2 dogs, everything was great. But on the inside I was dying. I just could not get honest with anyone. This guy that I was with, on the outside, he was great. He was muscly. He had a really nice Range Rover. He was like this really nice man. And, you know, behind closed doors, he was nasty, abusive on a daily basis. He was sexually abusing me, emotionally abusing me, verbally abusing me on a constant. And my only way out of that was to have a bath 3 times a day just so I could sit there and gamble in peace. It became my crutch. Gambling became my escape. And eventually the relapse happened, you know, and it took me. It took me. Now, throughout my gambling, I only ever had one interaction with an operator, and this is how it went. So I'll leave this up on a screen for a couple of minutes. But whilst you guys are reading, I'll give you guys some clarity behind the situation. I'd been gambling from site to site to site. Yeah, every time a deposit limit would max out, I would go on to another one, and then another one, and then another one. And eventually one of them accounts got suspended. And it must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning. My nose was just pouring with blood because I'd been using so much cocaine, and I was in deep psychosis, and I was like, I need to get this account back. And I get this email, and they've tried to contact me, and they need to speak with me regarding my account. And all I wanted to do was get my account back. So I'd done every means necessary to not have to speak with them directly on the phone. Look, you can see the time, 3:33 in the morning, and I wrote this message completely out of my head, frantically trying to get my account back. And this is the excuse that I tried to make. My ex-partner had gotten control of my phone, therefore decided to use it for his own use, which was a massive lie. This since has been rectified, and I've now got my phone back. In the process, my phone has been damaged, so I cannot get on the phone with you, which was a lie. But I would like my account reactivated. And this is the bit that makes me laugh looking back on that today. I can assure you that I'm in control. And now any operator in their sane mind would have seen my account and would have instantly been like, you're emailing us at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, are you okay? And their response, basically, they would not unblock my account unless I spoke with them on the phone. So I had to kind of pluck myself up, try and sober myself up, hype myself up, and say, all right, here's a number you can ring me on. Giving them my phone number, which was supposedly broke. So I spoke to them on the phone. And bless the guy on the end of the phone, I can't really remember much of it, but I just remember he sounded like he didn't know how to handle a young female on the phone to him. I was doing anything that he said. I was manipulating the situation. I was lying, saying everything that he wanted to say just so I could get my account back. And I did. And for the next 6 months, I just completely went downhill. I was like a dead girl walking, and looking back at those pictures, I don't recognise myself in those. It was the only thing that I lived for was gambling and using at that point. I had no care for my appearance. I had no care about washing, bathing, brushing my hair, cleaning my teeth. I weren't going to work, or if I was going to work, I was having panic attacks and psychosis episodes. I was being abused. And I used to sit there and think to myself, how can I get out of this abusive relationship without having to tell anybody that I'd relapsed, without telling anyone how much debt I got in, without telling anybody what's wrong with me? How can I get out of this abusive relationship and still keep the things that make me feel safe? I was deluded. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. And I thought, okay, I'll just do one more. I'll just do one more bet. Or I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say to myself, I'm never doing it again. I'm never going to do this again. Then after a can of Monster and a Kit Kat at lunchtime, suddenly that thought comes back into my head that maybe it might be okay and things might be different. And it got to the point where I racked up so much debt. I got an £8,000 loan out. That went in a week. Then I got a £10,000 loan out the next week to try and pay back that loan. But that went. I had a flex account. I had an overdraft. I had 2 credit cards. And bearing in mind, I was barely 22 at this point. And I remember taking that picture and I just made peace with the fact that I weren't making it to 23. I just accepted the fact that I was either going to kill myself or that I was going to let the drugs do it for me. You know, I didn't care about my family, my mum, my sister, you know, my nan and my granddad, and I was trapped. It was like I was in this really dark room and I had no air. I was suffocating. And we're going to bring it now to October 2022. The guy that I was with, his dad had passed away, and we went to his funeral. And it was the first time that I'd saw my mum, my nan, and my granddad for the first time in 3 or 4 months. My nose is pouring with blood at this point. You know, I've got severe damage to my nose now because of this. I was blackout drunk, can barely remember a thing. But what I do remember is my mum, she looks at me and she goes, "If you do not come home now, I'm calling the police." And I just remember running home the next day because I just didn't want this to become a thing. I wanted to compress it down. If I can just control the situation, if I can just diffuse this situation, it will all be fine and I can continue doing what I'm doing in secret. So I come home and it's like a big family intervention. My mum's there, her friend's there, my nan and granddad are there. My auntie's there, the one who's in recovery for gambling. And she says to me, she's like, "Megan, we can see that you've relapsed. We can see it. You know, your nose is constantly bleeding. It looks like it's going to fall off. You're 8 stone. You look like a zombie. But there's something else that you're not telling us. What is it?" They just wanted to know what it was. And I said to my mum, and I looked her in the eye and I said, "Mum, I can't stop gambling. I've got in £24,000 debt in the last 6 months because I cannot stop gambling." And she laughed at me. She laughed and she said, "I don't believe you. You are a liar." And she would not believe me. Even my auntie was like, "There's no way that you're a compulsive gambler. No way. Like, how can you, 22-year-old girl, be a compulsive gambler?" And it took for me to have to throw my phone to my auntie and look at the bank statements of millions and millions of transactions over the years. You know, I just gave them my phone. I was done. And I said, "Please, please believe me." You know, I couldn't blame her. I can't blame her because she didn't understand. She didn't know. You know, it's not every day you see a young woman coming through the doors of GA. So eventually they believed me, you know, and it didn't. I wish I could say I stopped there. I wish I could say that was my D-Day. That was the day that everything started to get better, but it didn't. You know, one thing that I know for sure is nobody could stop me from gambling or using. My mum, my sister, I couldn't stop for anybody. I remember distinctively one night I was gambling on children's games because my mum had put GamStop on my phone, and I was gambling on a children's game on the App Store, and I'd spent £200 on in-game purchases. And I just remember my mum and my sister crying in the room next door, and I could hear them like trying to be quiet, but I could hear them, and it broke my heart because I didn't understand why I couldn't stop for them. You know, I just didn't know how to live life without using and without gambling, because going back to 2020, those were the things that kind of got me out of those feelings of uselessness, depression, rejection, grief. You know, they were the things that kind of picked me up, and I'd spent that whole them 2 years, you know, relying on those. And I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to. And on the 2nd of December 2022, I remember I have a massive mirror in my room, like huge wall mirror. And I just stood up I think I was going to go to the toilet, or I can't remember what I was doing, but I remember getting up and just looking at myself. And you walk past a mirror a million times, and I never saw myself. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but I was just looking at myself, and it felt like someone had ripped a blindfold off me, and it was like I was able to see for the first time what I was actually doing to myself. And I just burst into tears. Because I just wanted to make that girl better. I didn't want to continue living the way that I was. And I was really fortunate to go to rehab on the 7th of December for 2 months. I went to a women's charity called Gordon Moody here over in the UK, and I went to their residential for 6 weeks. And it's the only gambling treatment centre in the UK that is specifically for women. And I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only woman in the world who was similar to me, who suffered with an addiction like how I do. And I was scared. I was absolutely terrified, because I didn't even know how to do a simple thing like make my bed or brush my teeth or make a meal, and I was about to be sent off halfway across the country in a stranger's car and go to treatment, and that's me saying goodbye to my sister on that day. I put them through hell, my family. I put them through absolute hell. So the least I could do was give them a break and do something for them so they know that I'm safe, put me away somewhere. And you know what? Rehab turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I met people who were just like me. I realised that I wasn't on my own, and I started to learn how to live again. I went to rehab on the Wednesday. Now, bearing in mind, I couldn't even get out of bed to go to the toilet. It was that bad. But I got to rehab on the Wednesday, and by the Friday, I was climbing a mountain. How amazing is that? I learned how to love myself again. I learned how to forgive myself, because I put myself through a lot of pain. And I learned how to speak up about my gambling, because I could, for the first 2 weeks, I would not stop talking about my alcoholism, my drug addiction. They're like, Megan, what about gambling? Let's talk about gambling. And I'd think, no, because I was ashamed, I was scared. But it turns out there's so many people out there who are just like me, and who have been through what I've been through, and who understand and who get it. And going to Gordon Moody and living with two amazing girls who are in the same position as me, it was just amazing. And we even spoke about things that weren't even anything to do with gambling, such as my health and well-being, how to love myself again, how to manage my finances, my budgets. And I just learned how to live life, and my mum and my stepdad, they come and visit me over Christmas, because I was in there for Christmas and New Year, and they travelled 6 hours to come and see me and give me my Christmas presents and stuff. And I thought they hated me. I thought they absolutely hated me. And I'm so grateful to have such a supportive family in my life today. Since leaving treatment, my life is completely unrecognisable. As soon as I left treatment, I actually went through Epic Restart Foundation, Epic Global Solutions. We also have a charity, Epic Restart Foundation, and they help and mentor people who are like me. They are made up of lived experience, and then I got 6 months worth of mentoring with a lady called Stacey Goodwin, and she was just amazing. And I made all these new connections and all these new friends in recovery, and I learned to love myself again. And my life has just been absolutely insane ever since. I've done amazing work for Gordon Moody. I've done podcasts. You know, I volunteer as a peer supporter sometimes. I even was on the Gamble Aware Lived Experience Council as well. But most importantly, you know, besides all of that, like, I got my family back. I can be a daughter today. I never thought my mum would ever trust me again, but today, you know, she's like my best friend. We may clash sometimes, but the relationship is just amazing. You know, my sister, she's just turned 18. You know, she's got an amazing partner and they're going out clubbing, experiencing the world. And it makes me so proud to see how far that she's come as well. And I've got an amazing relationship today, a healthy relationship. And not just with like my partner, but with myself. And I think that's the biggest thing that I can take away from this is the amount of love and respect that I've got for myself now for doing something like this. And this honestly should be the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You know, oh, you're 22 years old and you went into rehab and you're in recovery. This is so boring. Like, you'll never be able to go out and socialize again. That's definitely not the case. My life is far from boring. I went to a rave just before Christmas, a drum and bass rave, completely sober. And I had the best time. You know, my life today is just absolutely incredible. And that is pretty much the end of my story. You know, long may it continue. And the work with Epic is just the beginning of my journey. You know, so watch this space because I'm coming. But that's pretty much it. So if anyone's got any questions or anything like that, please raise your hand, pop it in the chat. We've still got a little bit of time. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. So thank you guys so much. And I'm here to answer any questions that you guys have. Don't be shy, guys. You can literally ask me anything.
We do have a couple of raised hands, so I think we've got well, definitely Mel. Well, Mel, do you want to go? There's so many people in this room, I can't see who's got their hand raised.
An accident on my side, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was amazing to listen to.
Thank you.
Then I have a question. Do you think that your early winning experience, so you talked about winning 60 quid off 20 quid, do you think that had a big impact into why you went into gambling the way that you did?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, because I remember going into bingo every time after that thinking, right, I've won 60 quid and we're going to win again. So we're going to keep on going because I know you can win. So we're going to do it until we win. So 100%, yeah, definitely.
You talked a little bit later about different signs. You stated that your behaviour changed. So now, as operators, a few years on, I think we look more intrinsically at the gambling behaviours. Do you think that an earlier intervention would have been more helpful to you?
100%. 100%. You know, if someone will have come to me when my gambling started increasing and I had at that point where I got my first loan out, at that point I was pretty much gambling every day. So there definitely would have been signs there on the operator's side that would have suggested harm. And I definitely think an interaction, if someone had intervened at that point there before I'd crossed that line, you know, I 100% would have, I probably would still be gambling today. You know, that's the truth.
And you talked about the interaction with the young guy who didn't really know what to do with you.
I know, yeah.
What would your word of advice be to us as operators who run safer gambling teams, social responsibility teams? How can we more ably direct our eye onto people like you? What would have helped us in your situation?
Do you know what? And I think this is really important. You know, us as gambling addicts, we experience stigma, but what I also think is important that you guys must feel stigma too. Like, I think the guy on the other end of the phone, he probably thought, oh my God, how can I help this young woman, like I'm a middle-aged man, like, do I feel equipped enough to help this person? And I think one of the biggest things I would say is don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid. You know, I mentioned that I was in financial abuse and the guy kind of brushed past it as if it was a taboo subject to not speak about. You know, just don't be afraid just to ask that extra question about how are you doing, you know? And just, you know, and if you don't feel like you're equipped, then find someone who you think might be. Don't just try and get them off the call as quickly as possible because you don't feel comfortable. Try and find someone who you might think might be more comfortable, you know, and you'll be surprised, you know, just the simple questions that you ask, it'll make such a difference.
I picked up on something you said when you said you would rather talk about drink and drugs and admit that you were a drinker or a drug user, abuser of both of those things, than talk about your problem gambling. And then you talked about your abusive relationship. Where does that come? Because of course they all come with their own stigma. Which one of those latter two would you have preferred to reveal?
Probably the abuse.
How can we go about reducing the stigma? I mean, you're doing a bloody good job here. But how do you think that the world can go about reducing the stigma of things like alcohol and drug and gambling and even domestic violence?
I think by not shying away from the subject, not shying away from the oh, this is a big thing. Like us as Epic, we've actually just recently designed a suicide awareness course, and it's all about breaking down. And today is actually World Suicide Prevention Day, as funny enough. And you know, it's about just saying, like, just not being afraid to talk about it. Do you know what I mean? Because if the world wasn't so afraid of talking about stuff like that, then there wouldn't be many people who feel stigmatized by it. You know, because it happens to so many people, and I know there's so many more young people out there who are suffering just like I did. And because I've seen them and I've met them and I've helped them as much as I can, you know. But the societal pressures, and I feel like society these days it's crazy. I feel like the world is going a bit mad at the minute, and it makes it so much harder when society's like that for us young people, especially because it's everywhere. It is everywhere. I think it's just about speaking and talking and getting the conversation going. Yeah.
And that's exactly why we bring you in. And so if there's no more questions, there's loads of compliments in the
I can see them. Thank you guys so
the
much.
chat list. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You got me when you said I thought my parents hated me. So sad. Just joining in with you. So thank you for coming. This has been Megan in Bally's Responsible Gambling Education Month. And I would just like to say thank you so much again, and we hope to work with you more in the future.
Of course, 100%. Thank you guys so much.
Take care. Speak soon. Bye.
Oh wait, we've got some people with their hands up. Come in.
Join me in crying, Kim. And we've got Sarita now. Come on, Sarita. Or maybe they're just waving.
Oh, are they waving?
I'm going to stop this recording now.
Okay.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
God.